Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Viewer, and this is Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 16. This match here was done at the earliest time slot on Saturday, and on Friday I had just finished a really long session of Sword World where I actually finally completed a campaign at max level. So I'm glad I got that done, but it was also very exhausting, and despite being exhausted, I was still up very late and was like, you know what, it's 3 a.m., let's do some Apex and see what happens. At this point, if I do lose, I will lose points. I'll never D-rank, but I do have points to actually lose now, so I'll try to not lose just to see if I can see how far I can go. In any case, not much to say about the box itself. I've been working on inscriptions on the chorus, try to make her a little bit beefier in general, as well as just improve her heals overall. Since my opponent tends to ban, Rosenseal and Liana, and I usually prefer the chorus over Sissy White, so might as well, if she's going to be my quote-unquote primary healer, I might as well make her as good as possible. Keeping the Awakened one in the box has definitely been a good call, since my opponents do like to ban her. One, because she's the Awakened one, but she's also a faction buffer, and I do have a lot of time faction in the box. Our opponent here is Yika Cook. I don't know. There's no vowels here. The box itself does have some terrifying units, though it is somewhat of a mixed box, which is always to my advantage. This here is this guy. I keep forgetting his name. Give me a moment. Andriel. That's his name. I don't know why I keep wanting to call him Laurent or something. He looks like a Laurent. Anyway, Andriel here. The first ban here was actually kind of hard to decide. I know if I don't take the Awakened one, my opponent can very well just ban Rosenseal and then just grab the Awakened one and possibly do some swap shenanigans. Aurora is also a pain. He has his freaking, I think he has an inscription now that makes it so he builds up stacks even better now. The rest of them I'm not as worried about. And then freaking Andriel here is essentially just a much more painful Gentoki. So I've seen videos of what he can do, and if you let him get going, he can definitely be a huge problem. I think he has ways of guard bypassing as well, and self-resing and all sorts of other nonsense. So I ban him. Go ahead and get rid of him. As for the box itself, I said it was kind of a mixed box. It has 3 tanks, 2 healers, and then kind of a mixture of both magic and physical damage. Seems to have a lot more AoE potential than single target, though there's definitely plenty of Sword Soul type attacks in that box. As always, I grabbed Christiane. It's been tempting to go ahead and replace Lightbringer, even though Lightbringer is definitely a very good tank, but I don't actually... Her quote-unquote faction buff has become a lot less useful since I don't really have any holy classes except for my healers now. So I may try to grab somebody else. The other reason why you want to keep Lightbringer is just her stacks that soak up things like Dispels, so she can actually potentially survive a hit. So I don't know. I kind of want to grab somebody else, but I'm also... I mean, the only time I ever even need to ever grab Lightbringer is if they ever make me not take Christiane. Which, as you see, they have plenty of other ban priorities, so I may not have to worry about it. I can't just send Christiane by herself, because then they'll just ban her immediately, and then I have no tank. So it's kind of just a dead slot in most cases. In any case, so I get Christiane, and then my opponent's going to, as predicted, get rid of Rosenseal, gets rid of Connie, and grabs Awakened one, just right off the bat. So I was like, okay, gotta deal with that now. I haven't had too many matches where I've had to go up against someone else's Awakened one, because I tend to ban them pretty early. So it's definitely something I'm going to have to get used to at some point, because there's just too many big threats now for me to prioritize the Awakened one every time. Again, I still had a lot of options as far as problems I had to deal with here. Aboro and SP Bernhardt I felt were the biggest ones. I've dealt with Gentoki before, I've dealt with Grenshield. Sword and Light and Shadow is probably the biggest issue that that will probably give me problems. And of course SP Leon is always an issue, but he's not, like, I have healers, and I have ways to get rid of his turn 8 now, so it's not that big of a deal. So I grabbed Liana. This was kind of an early pick. I had 3 healers left, but I definitely wanted to make sure I have at least immunity. a source of immunity, which of course Leona does have with her 3C and Gossipal. So that way I can try to mitigate the amount of influence Awakened One has with her her talent debuff. My opponent goes ahead and starts chipping away at my my assassins, gets rid of Silvaria, which not too often that people actually ban my Silvaria first. So Silvaria gets rid of Kyura, grabs Grinshield right off the bat. So I was like, alright, gotta deal with that now. So I get rid of Jintoki, get rid of Sword and Light and Shadow. Since I have Christiane, prioritizing physical damage over magic I felt was probably the strongest thing. Also, since I have Leona, debuffs are not that big of a deal anymore. So that's the plan. Grab Grinshield. I mainly grabbed her, one, just in case they grab a tank, and that way I can find a way to bypass that. It also forces my opponent to stick to a very condensed formation if necessary. The other reason, of course, is I still have plenty of strategic faction available. So, well, actually, I think I only have one, which is Illustrial. I don't think the others have strategic. But in any case, it's a faction buffer, so it gives me something. At this point, they go ahead and ban Sissy White and my other tank. I don't know what the purpose of that was. I'm guessing it was probably a counter pick to ensure I don't take two tanks to counter Grinshield or something. I don't know. I don't really know the purpose. That or my opponent was expecting that Leon will be strong enough to deal with Christiane, which tends to not be the case. At this point, I was like, all right, well, they have two healers. They're not going to do... if they're not going to take a healer, I'm just going to take those away from them. So now they have no reliable way of cleansing debuffs, and they don't really have a consistent way of healing anymore. They could potentially passive heal with their Holy units using the hammer, depending on what they have equipped. Well, that's about it. So, at this point, I had a few options. Since they have Grinshield, I definitely wanted to grab an Archer. I wasn't really too sure Namiya was going to be able to do much in this particular match. I think she probably could have been okay because she can throw out a lot of terrain, and that terrain can do damage and debuffs. But I grab Illustrial because strategic faction, and and I can rely on the mountains above and below to kind of progress her pretty quickly. So they go ahead and get rid of Namiya, get rid of Tatalia, leaves me with Pyrotes and Lycoris. They go ahead and take Auden Kelma, which does give them some additional mobility with the portals. At this point, I go ahead and get rid of Lena. Lena wasn't too big of a threat, but I'm going to end up killing something, and she's going to get enraged and then start, 100% critting, so I may as well not give that to her. And I was completely okay with them having a tank that doesn't really provide any healing. I get rid of Christiane so they don't reduce any potential AoE damage. Yeah, I think that was probably the best call. Lane DS does reduce range damage as well, but it's not that big of a deal. I grab Lycoris. This will give me an additional healer. Also, it gives me an additional source of immunity, which is also important. Since anything she targets specifically will get immunity. This will ensure that I have more ways to try to prevent Awakened One from spreading her freaking little binding debuff that she can use to flip me around. In any case, my opponent does grab a tank, because they only have tanks left. They grab Lightbringer, and we'll go from there. Alright. My cat is being incredibly adorable. Alright, get off my desk. Alright, so we got Illustrial here. Elven Cavalry Archers, her exclusives, Roundabout. Lycoris here. I did change things up a bit. Usually I kind of go full support. In this case, I did just go... I went, grabbed her Transformation, grabbed her 3C, and grabbed her Mass Heal. That way I have an alternative just in case I need to do some consistent damage. Since I can throw out the damage terrain and extra debuffs and stuff, and they don't have ways of cleansing, this might actually be useful. Got Christiane here. I brought Phalanx. Majority of the threats here are physical damage. They do have some magic units. Thankfully, all their magic units are using AoEs and aren't using single targets. Grinshield here, standard kit with Air Slash, War Falcons, and then Leona here at 3C with Act Again. The Act Again, I feel like I didn't really do as much with. As for my opponent, Awakened One with Deck Gunners. I'm guessing my opponent was thinking I was going to bring Angels, but I didn't. That or just wanted flat physical damage. And then, as mentioned, all AoEs, 3C, Dimensional Shift, and Black Hole. Lightbringer here brought Holy Shield Bash, which is the one that gets stronger as allies die. And then her faction buff 3C with Light Flow. Also, the troops are Holy Guard mages, so she's completely immune to Twilight Star and things like that. Leon here, Steelmane Werewolves, and there was a few things I wanted to read about this because I wasn't entirely certain. Ignore enemy units when moving, blah blah blah. Okay. So I believe, okay, so I think his kit is if you do something to him, if he has this exclusive armor, he can make it so he can ignore terrain things and use it as extra movement. I'm not used to him having Steelmane Werewolves with his troops, so that's probably what confuses me right now. Because yeah, I think he usually has like what the Mana Bite guys or whatever they're called. I figured that's what they use. But in any case, AoE, Blue Dragon Strike, Chivalry, so pretty standard kit there. Also, if you don't know about SP Leon, he's not limited by cost. So he can. That's why he has a 3 cost and 2. Actually, I think Chivalry is 1 cost, isn't it? I don't remember. Oh well, ignore me. Auden Kill now. Fairy Spirit Prophets, Deflection, which just gives her a buff whenever she goes through when allies go through portals. Also, it just gives her a flat and defense increase. 3C Explosion, and then Black Hole. And then we got Grinshield here. She also brought her AoE. She brought Cold Shield and her 3C. Star-wise, I don't know if there's... I think I'm going to... Since this is a Season 15 guy, apparently, I'm going to assume they have max stars. Alright, let's do this. So I try to move a little aggressively here. Despite the reasonably high mobility on the opposing side, really the only thing I need to worry about is Auden Kill now. Auden Kill now can go to here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, put a portal here. And then from there, if they were going to do some cheeky things, like, you know, do a move act again with Chivalry, or throwing a shield, or swapping or something, they would end up here and then move, like, you know, anywhere from 2 to 3 spaces. So based off that, I can kind of space myself out to ensure I don't provoke any early attacks. I think I could have probably been afford to be a little aggressive to try to bait them to do something, but I played it pretty safe here. And my opponent plays it pretty safe as well. So yeah. So where I'm at worst, I could be hit by some AoEs, but the AoEs will only hit maybe at best 1 or 2 targets. But yeah, as predicted, portals being thrown up. Portals do debuffs if I happen to be near them. I'm currently out of the range though. Alright. And I am trying to control my turn order to ensure I maximize my faction buffs as much as possible. Grinshield does provide a ton of faction buffs for this party as well. Auden Kelmo and Leon are both strategic factions. And then Awakened One can buff herself with her own faction buff. So I'm kind of keeping spread out. I'm a little concerned about things like the shield, but since at this point, best case scenario, the only move again, act again that Grinshield has is the Cold Shield. Is it Cold? Yeah, Cold Shield. She would have to go all the way to here, and then she can only throw her shield to here. So as long as I keep that measurement in mind, I can kind of just... I don't have to be in a cross formation at 24/7. One thing that I was a little frustrated on, because usually when I see like a season 15 banner, I always expect the worst, I kind of expect the best as far as like skill. And then I see things like, proccing Breeze or proccing 10 Youth Breeze, and I get a little frustrated when that happens. Because it did happen quite a bit. Oh, I guess one thing to note real quick is I did throw up my 3C immediately. I threw it on Grinshield. I knew with pretty much certainty if anyone was going to get hit by the talent debuff, it was going to be my highest mobility characters. So that would be Grinshield and Illustrial. Illustrial has some ways to negate at least some of the movement with using terrain. And I wanted to have kind of Grinshield ensure that she could put pressure on the formation. So that's why I put the 3C on Grinshield. I do have the accessory that extends the duration by 1 turn. So she has 3 turns of immunity, and as predicted, my opponent either didn't pay attention or I don't know. But my opponent attempted to put the debuff on Illustrial and Grinshield. Grinshield's immune, so good times there. It does heavily harm Illustrial, as you can see. Her movement's pretty much completely shot down at this point. In any case, I go ahead and just throw up some AoE reduction on Illustrial just to ensure she stays alive. And then my opponent did this, and I was confused. Yeah. Did some AoE, threw out some terrain, did some damage. I am immune to fixed damage with Grinshield. I'm immune to all the debuffs, so that is a thing. Yeah, I don't know if my opponent miscounted. Maybe didn't take into account the Steelbane werewolves and the cavalry stuff. Ensured that this swamp and this forest is what's gonna eat up one of his movement. Because yeah, he could have maybe if there was like regular terrain in these 2 tiles, he could have gone to like here and then AoE'd and hit like more. Essentially, you'd be able to hit everyone but Liana at that point. I mean, it still wouldn't have made a huge difference. And in either case, he's still like he's out of position at this point. He moves back, and I'm like, okay. Like, I was super confused, because I was like, did you just give me Leon? I mean, my first thing I was concerned about when I checked his stats was this kind of relatively high defense with 950 there. I can get rid of some of his buffs, but I can get rid of 3 of his buffs and convert them into debuffs, which will probably get eaten by the immunity. But I was like, alright, well, I can attack him in Forest to get extra bonuses. Illustrial's Inscription, the benefit from it doubles if she happens to be in forest terrain, so she gets even more attack. So I was like, I kind of need to take this opportunity. I wasn't sure if this was like a bait, like to make me, you know, hit Leon and then fail to kill and then expose Illustrial. But Illustrial's roundabout isn't restricted by any of the binding that she has on right now. So I can literally just go to here, shoot, and then get back into guard range easily enough. In fact, I can get back into guard range and outside of the terrain. So yeah, I wasn't really sure what's going on here. And I got rid of his defense buff so that he now doesn't have very high defense. I need to do about 30,000 here. And I do about 40,000 with a crit. Also, wonderful thing here is it did refresh my faction buff, because she is a strategic faction, and she got killed. So my opponent took advantage of the portal, got into portal range using the Tenya Breeze buff, and just AoE'd me. Again, didn't really make a huge difference. It procced the Floral Realm thing I put up. Again, Grinshield's immune to debuffs. I did get some debuffs. Some of them are annoying, like Silence here, but I have 2 healers, including Liana, so I actually go ahead and use this as an opportunity to get rid of some of the terrain. More importantly, I centered it on Lycoris. So now Lycoris is immune to all debuffs. So just in case I ever get hit with anything, you know, whenever the cooldown for this talent goes off, she can possibly resist it. Alright, so my opponent moves in. Again, I'm still playing it safe, because I still need to deal with Grinshield. So I'm kind of passing turns here. I had my Grinshield just pass turn in place, which just did a bunch of passive healing. I did go ahead and do an act again with Grinshield to see what my opponent does. I was very tempted to try to see if I can kill their Grinshield, but I don't think I would have been able to. And still be able to get bypass the guard. I could get kill on Awakened one, but of course she'll just come back with a copy. I did proc Breeze here, so I could actually go for Audenkelmo, but honestly, Audenkelmo is not that big of a threat for me anymore. So I was kind of just okay with all this. So yeah, Dimension Shift here. Procced another freaking Tenya Breeze. Because of course. Get hit with Dark Hole. Majority of my team now is immune to debuffs, so didn't really do anything. Alright, and then my opponent goes up and just goes to town here with Holy Shield Bash. Does reasonably good damage, mainly because Phalanxes are very not resistant to magic. It does have a slight buff because I did kill one of their units, so it's doing an additional 15% damage. but there's not really that much I'm worried about here. Looking at these stats here, I was like, I'm probably not going to be able to punch through this tank anytime soon. Also, look at these buffs, man. She's got like immunity, all this stuff here. So I went and took this opportunity to go ahead and transform, and because I didn't want to just heal, I wanted to start chipping away. So I go ahead and 3C here. Does a little bit of damage, does some healing, gets rid of some debuffs, applies some debuffs, though they're all immune. Alright, so yeah, the talent refreshed. It got reapplied to Celestial, who wasn't immune. Grinshield was still immune, so yeah. So yeah, at this point, since their tank went forward, sorry, I'm getting a lot of pings on my Facebook at the moment. I was able to use the shield to reduce Grinshield's movement. That way I had higher movement. Unfortunately, it was not quite enough to get kill. But I was able to get rid of a lot of things. So one thing I wanted to check real quick. Oop. Okay, cannot be dispelled. So the shield was going to stay up regardless. But the important thing here was... so there's a couple things. I had to keep Grinshield here for a while because their Grinshield could actually throw a shield here and then, you know, kill one of my units. But with this and all the debuffs I just hit with, my opponent's not going to be able to move anywhere. So my opponent can throw a shield out and then move away, but that's okay. But in any case, this was kind of aggressive, and I was a little worried here because I was like, I need to kill some of these units before Grinshield arrives. So, get hit with a regular attack. I knew that wasn't going to kill. It was going to hurt, as you can see. And then I get greedy again. So, I had some options. I can go and kill Grinshield. That's a guarantee. But I didn't really feel like that was probably the best call. I wanted to get rid of Auden Kelmo. I did have... Yeah, I have debuff, but I can't remove it. So Grimble Crusher is just going to do regular damage, but I figured it was going to be enough to kill Auden Kelmo. So I go ahead and move in. I have Twilight Star on her now, but then the Reflect proc came up, and I was like, alright, I'm going to end up losing Celestial here. So yeah. Did a trade there. Both sides got their faction buffs back, and then they kill each other. So the 3C on Grinshield does have first strike against non-flyers, but since both sides are flyers, they just kill each other. So at this point, I'm winning on the numbers game, but I am actually losing on damage. My opponent actually has much higher damage at this point. And all that ranged magic damage is actually shredding my phalanx, which is just adding a bunch more damage on top. But I am spreading damage terrain now. They don't really have a way of healing, and I'm applying debuffs now. So I can kind of just keep this going. So as you can see, the gap between us on damage is... They're taking the lead at this point, but I kind of have control over everything. I've now got my special talent buff active, since I got rid of my Effulgent stacks. And then I'm reapplying terrain, and every time it reapplies, it does its effect, which is fixed damage and a random debuff. So this was pretty significant. The debuff that got applied was buff immunity. So buff immunity, you know, obviously it says it on the 10. You can't get any buffs that get applied you become immune to. And she tried to put up her faction buff. So all of those buffs were just completely negated. That her buff is now on cooldown. So this means that her guard range is only 1. She cannot counterattack in range, and her stats are significantly lower right now, as you can see on her bar there. So yeah, at this point I kind of have full control. I'm gradually catching up on damage, but of course my opponent's going to have AoEs coming my way soon. My opponent does not bother doing 3C, which is probably a good call. Actually, she probably should do 3C. Because they'll reapply our faction buff. So yeah, Dimensional Shift is back up. So I'm a little, and she has her talent debuff active again. Right now, Lycoris is immune to all debuffs, as is Christiane. I'll go ahead and reapply my faction buff. And I'm going to go ahead and put 3C on myself with Leona there. So now all three of them are immune to all debuffs. And I'm doing a ton of passive healing. So yeah, again, magic damage against Phalanx just shreds them. But it's just regular attacks. They don't have any actual single target skills. So yeah, Spellbound, I'm immune to all debuffs. And at this point I was like, you know what, you can't counterattack in range, so I'm just going to hit you. And I do a ton of damage. Her resistance to magic was actually not that great. Usually Lightbringer has insane magic resistance, but not in this case. She did light thing, she did, what's it called? Light Flow. Yeah, she did Light Flow. She was immune, I think it did apply the immunities, it did heal her a little bit. But she's also just standing in terrain right now, so have fun with that, I guess. I went and threw up the little small AoE passive that Christiane has for some extra damage. I do my act again to go ahead and start getting kills. So, first life taken away. I'm also I pretty much caught up on damage. Proc my armor. I have first strike this time. So I'm actually doing pretty good damage. And then, of course, the hammer is proccing. But can't counterattack at range, so I'll go ahead and kill you again. And that just leaves just the Awakened one, which the self-res doesn't matter then, because she's the last unit. So, really interesting match. I was definitely concerned I may have thrown at that one point, but yeah, I mean, my opponent didn't take a healer, and while I usually don't rely heavily on debuffs as part of my style, I mean, if they're going to let me do it, I mean, this was perfect. I was able to use Lycoris as a healer in the beginning, and then swap her to Dark type to essentially do a bunch of extra fixed damage and extra debuffs. And some of them were significant. Negating the faction buff was huge. If I hadn't have done that, I would have had to concern myself about like counterattacks, which I don't think still would have mattered that much. But it still would have slowed me down. At the very least, it would have made the damage race a little bit more difficult to catch up on. But I think in the end, it still would have turned up alright. And yeah, and stat reports are still broken. So good times. So yeah, really fun match. I was really exhausted during it, and this was definitely one of my wordier videos, so I apologize. But yeah, gradually moving on, and I will see you guys next time. So yeah, I'm the Prestigio. This was Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 16. I'll see you guys next time.